A woman with no friends, that phrase alone makes people uncomfortable. They assume she's broken, too quiet, too intense, too much, or worse, not enough. But what if the truth is this? She's not alone because she failed. She's alone because she refused to fake it. See, most people would rather belong than become. They'll shrink their dreams, dull their standards, silence their instincts, just to avoid sitting alone with their thoughts. But not her. She chose honesty over approval, growth over comfort, and self-respect over shallow connection. And yes, some nights are heavy, some mornings feel quiet in a way that echoes. But here's what most people don't understand. Silence is where clarity is born. When there's no crowd telling you who to be, no noise shaping your decisions, no validation distracting you from the truth, you finally hear your own voice. And that voice starts asking dangerous questions. What do I want? What am I capable of? What kind of life am I willing to fight for? A woman with no friends learns how to stand alone before she ever stands out. She builds discipline when no one is watching, confidence when no one is clapping, and strength that doesn't depend on being chosen. And let me be clear, this isn't about rejecting people. It's about refusing to settle for connections that cost you your identity, because the goal isn't to be surrounded. The goal is to be aligned with your values, aligned with your future, aligned with the woman you're becoming. And here's the truth most people miss. When you become solid in who you are, you stop attracting distractions and start attracting depth. The right people don't need chasing. They recognize strength. They recognize self-respect. They recognize a woman who did the inner work. So if you're that woman right now, walking alone, growing quietly, building patiently, don't rush this season. It's forging something unshakable, because a woman who can stand alone is a woman who can build anything. And when she finally lets people in, it won't be out of fear of being alone. It'll be because they earned a place beside her. That's not weakness, that's power. Solitude is not failure, even though the world tries hard to convince you that it is. We live in a culture that measures worth by visibility, popularity, and constant connection. So when someone stands alone, people rush to label it as a problem. But having no friends doesn't automatically mean something is wrong with you. Sometimes it means something is changing within you. Sometimes it means you've grown past the environment that once fit you, and the room you were in has become too small for the person you're becoming. Growth is uncomfortable because it creates distance. When your values evolve, when your goals demand more focus, when your standards rise, not everyone can come with you. The conversations that once felt exciting start to feel empty. The habits you used to share no longer align with who you are trying to be. And instead of pretending, instead of forcing yourself to stay where you no longer belong, you choose honesty. That choice often looks like solitude from the outside, but on the inside, it's integrity. Being alone in this season doesn't mean you are unlovable or incapable of connection. It means you are no longer willing to trade your peace for acceptance. You are no longer interested in shrinking yourself just to fit into a space that doesn't challenge or inspire you. Solitude becomes the natural result of self-respect, not social failure. It's the pause between who you were and who you're becoming. In that quiet space, something powerful happens. Without the noise of other people's opinions, you start hearing your own thoughts more clearly. You notice what drains you and what fuels you. You learn how to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it through distraction. You begin building an inner foundation that isn't dependent on constant validation. This is where confidence grows roots, not from applause, but from alignment. Outgrowing a room doesn't mean the room was bad. It simply means you were meant for something different. Solitude is not the end of connection, it's the refinement of it. It is the season where you learn discernment, where you stop collecting people and start valuing depth. And when the next room appears, it won't require you to explain yourself or diminish your growth. because it will match the woman you've become. Loneliness can be a training ground, even though most people run from it as fast as they can. We're taught to see loneliness as something to fix, something embarrassing, something that proves we're lacking. But loneliness isn't always a punishment. Sometimes it's preparation. Sometimes it's life removing distractions so you can build the strength you'll need for what's coming next. When you're alone, there's nowhere to hide, no one to blame, no one to lean on to make decisions for you. And that's uncomfortable because comfort has trained us to depend. Loneliness forces responsibility. It forces self-reliance. It forces you to confront your fears, your doubts, and the stories you tell yourself when no one else is around to interrupt them. That confrontation is hard, but it's also where resilience is built. In loneliness, you learn how to regulate your emotions instead of outsourcing them. You learn how to calm yourself without reassurance, how to motivate yourself without praise, how to keep going when no one is checking on you. This is mental and emotional strength most people never develop because they never stay alone long enough to build it. They fill the silence with people, noise, and distractions, but you stay, and staying changes you. This training ground teaches discipline. You wake up and show up even when no one is waiting for you. You work on yourself without an audience. You start doing things because they matter to you, not because they make you look good to others. That shift is subtle, but it's powerful. It turns external motivation into internal drive, and that kind of drive doesn't disappear when conditions change. Loneliness also sharpens awareness. You begin to see patterns you ignored before. You recognize which relationships were draining you and which parts of yourself you abandoned just to belong. You notice how much energy you gave away trying to be understood by people who never truly saw you. That awareness is painful, but pain here is instructional, not destructive. A training ground isn't meant to be easy. It's meant to prepare you for pressure, responsibility, and higher standards. Loneliness does the same thing. It builds emotional endurance, clarity, and self-trust. When connection eventually returns, it's no longer something you need to survive. It becomes something you choose from a place of strength, discernment, and self-knowledge rather than fear of being alone. Self-trust is the first relationship you will ever have, and it's the one that shapes every other connection in your life. Before anyone else can rely on you, choose you, or respect you, you have to learn how to trust yourself. And that kind of trust isn't built in crowds or constant validation. It's built in moments where you make decisions alone and live with the consequences. When you don't have friends to constantly affirm your choices, you start listening inward. You stop asking, "What do they think?" and start asking, "What do I know to be true?" That shift is uncomfortable at first because it removes the safety net of approval. But over time, it builds something far more powerful than reassurance, confidence rooted in experience. You begin to see that you can survive disappointment, uncertainty, and mistakes without falling apart. Self-trust grows when you keep promises to yourself. When you say you'll show up and you do. When you say you'll walk away and you follow through. Each small act of integrity becomes evidence that you are someone you can depend on. And that dependence changes how you move through the world. You stop tolerating disrespect because you know you won't abandon yourself to keep someone else close. Without self-trust, relationships become negotiations driven by fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being rejected, fear of making the wrong choice. With self-trust, relationships become choices. You don't cling. You don't chase, you don't over-explain. You know that even if a connection ends, you will still be standing because the most important bond remains intact. This relationship with yourself also sharpens your intuition. You learn to recognize when something feels off and to act on that feeling instead of dismissing it. You stop gaslighting your own emotions to make situations easier. You honor your boundaries not because someone told you to, but because you've learned what happens when you don't. When self-trust comes first, everything else follows with more clarity and less desperation. You choose people who complement your life instead of completing it. You enter spaces without needing to prove your worth. You move forward knowing that no matter what happens externally, you have an internal foundation that won't collapse under pressure. Purpose comes before people, even though most of us are taught the opposite. We're encouraged to prioritize fitting in, being liked, being included, as if connection is the starting point of a meaningful life. But when people come before purpose, you start making decisions to preserve relationships rather than to honor your direction. You delay growth to avoid conflict. You soften your ambition to stay relatable. Over time, you wake up surrounded but misaligned. When purpose leads, the dynamic changes completely. You stop asking who will approve and start asking what must be done. Your time becomes intentional. Your energy becomes protected. Not everyone understands that shift, and not everyone stays. Some people fall away not because you rejected them, but because they were only meant to walk with the version of you that hadn't yet committed to something bigger. Choosing purpose often looks lonely at first. It means saying no when others say yes. It means staying focused while others are socializing. It means being misunderstood, judged, or quietly excluded. But that isolation isn't a sign you're on the wrong path. It's often evidence that you're finally taking yourself seriously. Purpose demands sacrifice, and one of the first sacrifices is convenience in relationships. When your life is anchored in purpose, you no longer look to people to give you direction, identity, or worth. You already know where you're headed, so relationships become additions, not anchors. You don't chase attention because your energy is invested elsewhere. You don't beg for inclusion because you're building something that requires your full presence. That groundedness changes how people experience you. Alignment has a way of acting like a filter. When you are clear about what you're building, the wrong connections feel heavy and distracting, while the right ones feel energizing and natural. You don't have to force depth or loyalty. It emerges through shared values and direction. The people who enter your life at this stage aren't drawn to neediness or loneliness. They're drawn to clarity, discipline, and intention. Purpose-first living also removes urgency from connection. You're no longer afraid of empty space because your days are filled with meaning. You can walk away from what doesn't fit without resentment. You can wait without feeling behind. And when people do arrive, they meet you as someone already moving forward, not someone waiting to be saved or completed.